Most social media platforms have standards for what sort of content can be shared on them, or at the very least, they say that they do. And unfortunately, all too often, those break down. In past videos that we've done, we've talked about how easily anti-vax material spread throughout Instagram. Well, TikTok is not something we focus too much on, but a similar sort of thing seems to be happening with their algorithm, where radicalization is happening despite standards supposedly designed to stop that from happening. And we are very lucky to be joined on the show right now to talk about this and more. Abby Richards, research contractor for Media Matters and overall disinformation researcher. We're very glad to have you on.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you. So you did an experiment. I always love experiments like this to take sort of like a pure, fresh account on a platform and see what happens if you just act in a particular fashion. So can you tell us about that experiment?
Yeah, so basically we created a new account and then followed 14 accounts that were known to post transphobic content, and then started engaging on our For You page, exclusively engaging with transphobic content, and tracked all of the narratives for the next 400 or so videos that were fed to that account's For You page.
Okay, and so to be clear, for the standards that TikTok has, transphobic content, is that supposed to be available? Do they have standards against that?
Yeah, they have standards against hate speech and violence against marginalized communities, and absolutely not. Transphobic content does not fly under community guidelines.
Okay, well, at least technically, it appears
yes.
So you followed that sort of content, and then you just saw what the algorithm would deliver to you. So what sort of content ended up getting dished up?
Yeah, so first and foremost, more transphobic content. So really, once you engage with transphobic content, the algorithm recognized that you enjoyed that content and continued to feed it to you. But then in addition to that, a lot of homophobic content, misogynistic content, and racist content. And then over time, as we continued to engage, the content became more and more oriented towards the far right. So that included prominent far right talking points and major far right figures, conspiracy theories, anti-Semitism, and even calls to violence.
Okay, and so in this case, we're not just talking about an account that you've followed that's doing transphobic content that also talks about, I don't know, critical race theory or something. You're talking about suggesting new creators that are not themselves necessarily doing transphobic content, but it's broadening into other sort of far right material.
Yeah, it's kind of like the transphobia was this umbrella that then allowed for this other sort of hateful content to then be recommended to us. Essentially, the algorithm was like, oh, you like transphobic content. Would you also like homophobic content? How about misogynistic? How about racist? How about anti-Semitic? How about Islamophobic? So all of those other hateful narratives were fed to us once we engaged with this one.
And you said that there were also calls to violence. Do you recall any of the specific forms that would come in?
Yeah, they're a lot of the times coded, a lot of kind of mimetic, so they would kind of conclude, incorporate image and audio to make jokes about harming, particularly LGBTQ people, jokes about shooting up Pride. There was one that's in the article actually that we break down, shooting up a Pride celebration with comments that were encouraging that sort of action.
Okay, and I am guessing that they probably have standards that are supposed to stop inspirations towards violence. That seems like that's pretty common across social media platforms.
Yes, that does violate their community guidelines policy.
And so I'm curious, I know, so this article came out a little bit ago. I'm interested to see what has come of it, if anything. Has TikTok addressed the fact that their supposed standards don't seem to actually be in effect? Has there been, people in these communities that are being targeted by this content that are putting pressure on them? Do we have any reason to believe that things will actually change?
I have not heard anything myself from TikTok in response to this study. I know that it is in violation of their guidelines. And I do think that they have a hard task of policing all of the videos that go up on there. Like, that's not an easy task. But at the moment, they really do need to focus on prevention. And I really think that the study highlights that like, just taking the videos down after they've done the harm isn't enough. And TikTok will often do that, but that really doesn't actually prevent any of the harm that they're causing.
Okay, yeah, I can definitely see that. So you've described how certain types of content that seem like they go against the standards are continuing to proliferate. That said, there were some sorts of content that it seems like they are being a little bit more successful in cracking down on when you get into various levels of conspiracy theories. What did your experiment show in that area?
This particular experiment didn't really focus too much on conspiracy theories. My other work has focused on it extensively, and TikTok definitely does have a conspiracy theory virality problem that they're struggling with. So this one, we only found a handful. I would say mostly it was that sort of homophobic or misogynistic or racist hatred. The conspiracy theories were kind of adjacent to that content, but not necessarily the theme, like central theme.
See, I'm actually a little bit surprised by that. Like, I imagine when I've seen studies of radicalization, for instance, on YouTube, where they'll follow a few YouTube accounts and then see the algorithm, I feel like it definitely hits some of the spots that you were talking about, homophobia and misogyny, and definitely anti-Semitism. But it seems like there's a strong through line of very explicit conspiracy theories. So you're saying that they are there, but they didn't necessarily pop up in this experiment.
Yeah, I think this one was just more oriented towards transphobia and homophobia, and that's the sort of content that it gave. I can say that, like, in other work we've done, we found lots of conspiracy theories. So I think it's not really an either or, it's a yes and, like, both of them are true.
Okay. Now, in addition, you have what you call the conspiracy chart, which takes a look at a variety of different conspiracy theories based on the detachment from reality, which I find amazing. Could you tell me a little bit about this?
Yeah, it's a chart that really works its way up from based in reality to detached in reality. So at the bottom, you have actual instances of conspiracies. So times where people in power did abuse their power, something that happens regularly and is important to acknowledge that that does happen. And then once you move past that, you get into like the we have questions category, things that like maybe we just have, you know, some suspicions about, like it's a little bit more playful. Then you pass the speculation, like you leave reality and you get into like more of your aliens, kind of like weird conspiracies about people still being alive. And then you reach science denial, which is more of an objective denial of reality, whether that's, you know, our scientific process, health, health issues, whether or not elections were won. And then you pass the anti-Semitic point of no return, which is really where a lot of conspiracy theories end, which is with the really visceral anti-Semitism and this core idea that there's a group of evil Jews controlling the world.
Yeah, that does seem to pop up. There's a couple of things that I noticed here that I think are amazing. So one is you have in the secondary category, you have UFOs. So a basic idea that they exist. I love that. Then once people start speculating about specific things that the UFOs have done, like building Stonehenge and alien abductions, that's an extra step. That's believing you can say too much about these aliens. So I like that. But I wanted to ask you about QAnon because I'm not in any way, I don't focus my work that much on conspiracy theories or anything, but it has seemed anecdotally like it was sort of sucking up and like combining a lot of different conspiracy theories under one label, taking these communities and put them together. As someone with much more experience in this area, is that an accurate reflection of what's going on? And if so, is that actually very different than the conspiracy communities that existed before QAnon?
Yes, I would say that QAnon has really drastically changed the shape of those ecosystems of conspiracy theory kind of communities as we previously knew them. So QAnon is very much a big tent conspiracy theory where you can turn any conspiracy theory into some part of it. It's much more an ideology and a way of perceiving the world than necessarily one belief system, because not all of them agree on any single conspiracy theory. And they've, a lot of QAnon has kind of moved on in some ways, like they're not as obsessed with Q, this kind of fictitious figure who's supposedly a government insider, but it's more just shaped the general ecosystem that we're all living in now, where it's a lot more distorted away from reality.
Okay, exciting times to be living in for those of us covering the news, and I'm assuming for those of you studying these communities in depth. If you're watching this and you want more information about the experiment that we talked about, it is available at Media Matters. And Abby, I want to thank you for your research and for joining us. We really do appreciate your perspective.
Thank you so much for having me.
Check out the Damage Report podcast each day, wherever you get your podcasts, whether Pocket Casts or Stitcher or iTunes. You can join me as I give you the news and stories you want, with a range of co-hosts and interview guests jumping in on the fun each day. Again, that's the Damage Report, wherever you get your podcasts. And if you get them at iTunes, don't forget to rate and review. Sometimes I'll read them live on the show.